Hey everyone, I'm Clive.
Hey, Louis here.
This is Akush.
We're going to jump into the second in our camp series. You don't need a tent or bug spray. You don't even need your canoe or your canoe license, but you do need a healthy appreciation for better information management and potentially ISO 19650. There's a lot that we're going to cover, most of it demo, and we're really going to focus on actionable information requirements. So this first step in this planning, how to define clear, actionable information requirements and how to stop your projects really derailing, because a lot of the time we ignore this very important planning step at the start. If you haven't already, go and download this camp guide. It follows everything from assessing what you need through to closing out a project. And we've blocked it into these four main categories: the planning, the contracting, the tracking of all of those key pieces of information, and then the handover. What we're covering are the important aspects from making sure that you set the project off on the right foot to making sure you get the people on board and contracted for the right things, and then making sure that they're tracking, making sure that everyone's handing over the right information at the right time. In order to do that, there's lots of steps. So in each one of these sessions, we're going to focus on one of these aspects, and there were lots of challenges. If you don't get those things in place early, then that's where the pain begins. And that's exactly what we're going to focus on and fix so that you don't have the administration burden and that everything flows smoothly on your project. And here's why this matters. Let's look at some of the data. It's pretty alarming, but we're in an industry that is overloaded with data, with files and models and checklists and certificates and reports and schedules and estimates and RFIs. But do we really know how bad it is? Well, 90% of that data that we create is scattered across folders in random email chains, uncontrolled, inconsistent, not really organized, and nowhere near useful. And unfortunately, it gets worse than this. 90% of data is unstructured. Well, actually, probably because it's so unstructured, 96% of it, that gets so worse, 96% of it is unused. Can you believe that we're creating all of this data and it ends up in this digital graveyard, never actually delivering any value? And it's not just a fun statistic to throw on a slide, it's actually the root of why a lot of projects are slipping and why teams actually get frustrated and why we spend so much more time chasing information rather than actually using it to create value. And the obvious question is why? Why is that? Why is this happening? We think it's due to a few different challenges, a few different problems, but we think that they're solvable. So there's the bright news on the other end of it. The first problem is really that we're terrible at recording what's needed early enough. We have owners that say, we want a model. Okay, what kind of model? For what purpose? And what data do you need? If you record it in a spreadsheet, it can be very easy, flexible, but potentially not very structured and practical and valuable for other people down the other end of the road. And often it's an afterthought. Often we do it too late and fails. We end up with this problematic set of requirements that maybe people can't understand. It's not in their contract, and there are problems. It doesn't stop there either, because when we create information, we share it in a throw it over the wall type of way. We're flinging this package over the fence. I'm sure that that's not how the owner really wanted it to be delivered, but we work in silos. And if once it's sent, I think it's somebody else's problem. There's no accountability. There's no verification. There's, just hope that it lands in the right place. And without that clear responsibility, bringing it back to our campfires, who's in charge of the tent? That doesn't want to be a question that is asked when you're roasting your marshmallows and just about wanting to turn in for the night. Without those clear responsibilities, you're going to miss scope and you're going to have problems later on in the project when you're not going to be able to manage them so easily. And we also end up in less collaborative work, where if somebody's doing all the work, somebody's modeling everything, somebody's maybe doing too much. It's not really fair on everyone else. It's not collaborative. It's not the best way to run a project. And that unclear ownership obviously can drive discontent within the project teams as well. So teams think there must be a better way. This guy's using a 2D plan, maybe a PDF, trying to make out his path through the woods. And yeah, there is a better way. This guy's coming along with his GPS, his navigation on his phone. And yeah, let's just do BIM. But mixing both the camping and the BIM at the moment, and being able to achieve this is still challenging. And if we just said, let's just do BIM, and instead of having a structured workflow and a process and something that everyone can get behind and deliver, we really need that playbook, that definition, and how we collaborate and manage information. And ISO 19650 can be that process. But we ask how? How do we get there? How do we fix it? Stop drowning in paperwork and start doing the right thing and creating value from the start. Well, what we're going to show you are these three steps. The main one is getting started off on the right foot. And to do that, we need the leadership in order to be able to do that. So ISO 19650 says that we should have information leadership in the way of an information manager. We should define clear exchange information requirements, and we should make sure that the teams that are delivering the work are actually capable and have the capacity to do so. So there are the three key areas that we're going to go through. How do you appoint an information manager? How do you get all of the important aspects from the organizational information requirements? So what does the team that is receiving the asset at the end of it, what do they really care about? Why do they get out of bed in the morning? What the project requirements are and what the asset requirements are to drive those organizational information needs. And overall, it's about defining clear exchange information requirements. So we'll dig into that. And then understanding who can do it. Well, the pre-appointment BIM execution planning process, which is basically saying, here, these are our requirements. Can you meet these? And let's have a collaborative tender. Let's have a collaborative bidding and negotiation process where we go through this. Let's make sure that everyone's on the same page and make sure that we've got the right team on the bus to be able to deliver. So this is what we're going to go through. And in order to do that, we're going to visit all of these steps at the bottom. And through that, we will look at a lot of the demos. The first step is appointing information manager. And in order to do that, we have some really nice checklists in the application as well. So as part of one of the training programs, we introduced you to this. And so, for example, this first step, it says appoint information managers. Well, what do you need and how do you do that? There are some goals and some checklist items that you might want to go through in order to be able to do that. All of the paperwork is also included, the templates for being able to go through and appoint and making sure that the right people are in the right place. But essentially, there are a lot of checklists that we can take through. But enough of slides. Let's dig into what the steps can be to solve some of these challenges. What do you think, guys? Should we do that?
Let's do it.
Go for it.
Let's do it. So I'm going to jump over to Plannerly. A lot of the time, teams want to jump into a project and start creating, but actually, it's nice to take a step back and look at an overview of an account as a company. And a company might have different templates in a templates workspace, and they might also divide their projects up in different types of projects. And also, you might have access to certain projects and you might not access other projects. So here I'm a manager on a project. Here I'm not even a member of that project. But in order to manage templates as a team, we can have a team of people that administer all of our templates. If I jump into our template, I'm going to jump into the template for the document side of things first. I can see that we have a lot of sections of a document. And if I open one of those sections, I can see that there are certain parts of the document that I can edit, I can make updates to, and I can also have these things that are called smart fields in order to be able to drive my data in a more structured way. And in order to be able to use this information across multiple documents, I'm going to add another document tab, and then I'm going to import a standard that I already have. And that standard, if I grab it, is a Word document. If I drag and drop that in, it's going to create me some structured data. And this is a really important thing. So instead of it being just a Word document that's unstructured, it's now a really structured set of containers of requirements, and each one of these containers can be dragged around, moved around. It can be shared, it can be permissioned, it can have certain people that are allowed to access it and some people that are not allowed to access it. And then inside of here, I can also add those pieces, those smart fields of information that start driving the data. So we had here the project name as being something in a Word document that maybe we would just enter. Here we've called it the project title. And if I add these, the start date of our project, so we've got a project start date, and we've got the address, and suddenly we're starting to populate this with these smart fields pretty quickly. But we might also want to add new smart fields to our project as well. And if I do that, I can either go in here or I could go up to the top smart fields and I can start managing what we have. And in order to be able to maybe generate something that we want to use on another project, I can add a new smart field. And these smart fields can be tied into any of the project data. Or I could say maybe I want a set of formatted content, meaning that this is a new field and this is something I might want to type. It could be an image, it could be a checklist, like do this, then this, and I can start to either complete it in here or I can complete it inside of the project as well. What I'm going to do in this case, just for our example, is I'm going to actually make this field persistent so that when I use this template in another project, it's actually going to copy across what's in the field. Whereas the other ones that are not persistent, the data in that field is not going to be copied across. You'll see that in the next couple of steps. So what I've done here is I've added it. Now I'm going to add it to our section, and it's going to be this new field at the bottom. So you can see how we can define just single fields. We can define an area that we might want to edit, and we make it custom for our templates and our project.
Yeah, I was going to say it's like Word, but better. It has special features that we use in the industry. Typically, we see teams highlight these areas and provide instructions and say, hey, Akash, anything in purple needs to be filled in for project-specific areas. These are already dedicated in your template, so there's no need to look for them. There's no need to highlight and go across and make sure, double check and make sure that we didn't leave anything from the last project because we copied this template from that one. This removes that burden because when you transfer this template or from another project, these fields help you restart from fresh on a new project. And as Clive mentioned, each of these sections are structured so they have their own commenting and approval workflow, which we'll get into later in the demo.
Yep, absolutely. We're also able to define structured requirements in an Excel-based form as well. So let's jump into the scope, which is defining these requirements in even more structured way of a definition of requirements. What we have inside of the scope is this concept of rows of information and columns, which are the milestones. And then if I open up some of these folders, we can see that there are tasks that are represented in the cells in the grid. If we have to set up a common data environment and we want to see what's in this cell, I can open the cell. I can see the description of what we're doing, what team is actually assigned to it, what the status is, etc. I can see how we're going to go through the checklist of things that we need to do in order to be able to achieve that. And this becomes our template for our project. We'll use this, but I think that what I'll show in a demo is some more detail in the mechanical equipment that's being set up, and even down into understanding what the properties are that are required from certain teams, maybe the mechanical team here at this stage for an asset model. And at the moment, we're requiring 2 of the properties that are on this item. So we'll use this in a lot more detail in the demo. But as Louis was mentioning there, inside of this template project, we can actually have team members that are helping us to set these templates up and manage these templates. So instead of it being a Word document that somebody on your team has maybe somewhere on an FTP site, somewhere on a shared drive, or you have to keep on asking for it or finding it. It's actually templates that are continually managed, curated by a team that understands what the purpose is. Maybe this template could be for a specific project type, and you can regularly update them and everyone will have access to that latest and greatest information. So let's take a look at how we would use this template. I'm going to go back to the account homepage, and I'm simply going to create a new project. Oh, I'm not going to create it in my templates workspace though. I'm going to create it in my commercial workspace. And I'm going to call this project New Building for ABC Co. And I'm going to hit create. So now I've created this. I'm presented with a bunch of templates instantaneously, and they are available to everyone around the world. But I really want to access my company template, which was the one that I was just in the workspace that I had. And this presents me my EIR and also my construction contract. And I can be selective on what I want to add. If I wanted to open this and I could just drag one piece of the document, or I could drag a bunch of them at the same time as a folder of them. or I can just simply add all of it and it will add that to my project. And again, same thing for the construction contract that we had before. If I jump into this construction contract and I open up my project details, you can see that this field was persistent, meaning that when I entered something in our template, it carried it across as a starting point, whereas the project start date was not persistent. And this field was actually a field that's driven by the database and it's hooked into our project name. So the project title. So you can see a few things that are completing for us automatically. And then if I was to start to enter things into this form to complete the start date as an example. So if I click in and I choose today, what happens here is I'm not completing that start date just for this section. I'm actually completing it in every single section that it's used and also across all documents. So if that start date was used in another location here, project start date, it's actually updated there as well. So really quick and easy to get that started. Quickly jump into the scope. So we've used a template to start creating a project and it's almost too quick. So it's like now we've got our starting point for all of the documentation, but now we want to define our information requirements for the scoping. And if I jump into that template, I'm going to jump here and I'm going to look for the responsibility matrix. I'm going to bring in the mechanical scope. And it's now shown inside of our project with all of the information requirements as well. But I should share also the settings that we're importing. There's a lot of data that you can define and all of the fields that you can define. We'll get into that in a little bit, but you can define all of these and then you can be selective on what you actually want to import. So potentially
I was going to just mention that the scope template that we created in the template project, consider that like your master template. So you can define all the BIM uses or all the different phases of the project that you have. Someone asked, can I add non-model elements or, non-BIM projects? Absolutely. So you can set those up by folders. So like in Excel, you might have different tabs. Here you'll have one master template, but the flexibility comes in this import. So this is where you choose what milestones you want to bring in, what folders you want to bring in, whether you want the teams already assigned to them or not. This is that flexibility that comes in from a template, where a lot of teams might have to build separate templates, which are much harder to manage, because if one asset update, you'll have to make across multiple templates. Here, the beauty is that you're building one, and then when you go to another project, you cut out any of the items that you don't need. So this is that flexibility that Plannerly can offer when you start a project with one of those templates.
Yep. And we will be digging into the master information delivery planning and a lot more detailed responsibility matrix planning in the next session as well. Today, we're focused more on the owner's requirements from an asset perspective. So let's jump in and start defining some of those things potentially just for this asset handover. And maybe potentially what I should have done here is not actually define these milestones and just had the asset information model as a milestone. And then we can start to see whether as an owner, I want to have these as part of my handover. And I can start to understand really what the benefit is to me seeing those on my project.
So how about what if we wanted a custom element? Want to show them that?
Absolutely, yeah. Let's say that, yes, we want HVAC equipment, but maybe as an owner, I want the pumps in here specifically. So maybe this is something that I want to add. And actually, this shows me maybe I just want it to be called a pump and I'm going to add this as a pump. Well, that's not really very clear as a team that we should be following some kind of a standard. And so if I'm on my project and I want to connect into a standard, if I go to my project dashboard and then go to my settings, inside of my settings, I can then choose the classifications from a dictionary. And in this example, I'm going to use the Uniclass classification system and I'm going to save that. And now when I go back to my scope and I'm in this pump, it's now going to search that data dictionary and it's going to describe exactly which type of pump and then even down to the code as well. So let me turn on the classification codes so that you can see what happens when I select one of these. I am going to use air-to-air heat pumps. And this has a specific classification. It has a link to more definition in the Building Smart Data Dictionary. And now it's exactly as it's defined inside of that standard. So inside of the classification structure of Uniclass. If I start to want to define the requirements for my asset information model at this stage, I can open up this cell just by clicking, and then I can start to define certain things. I'm going to set this going for an image. So I want to be more visual. It's much easier to understand when I'm more visual. I have something that I can see. So I'm going to click this button to start creating an image based on everything that it knows about this object at the moment. And then define maybe a description. What do we need to define for this heat pump? The more you define, the more that the AI can generate. But maybe there are some checklists, some conditions of satisfaction that we can also add and start to define and describe our requirements pretty quickly and accept those. So now these might be things you obviously might want to change them. You might want to add new ones specifically to your project. But as you start to define much clearer information requirements, you can see here the update on the geometry was there. So now we've actually got geometry to represent whether I need just a generic representation, whether I'm really concerned about the fabrication level. And I would like it to be an as-built representation as how reliable that geometry wants to be. And I would like it to be a certain level of accuracy as well. So I can say, potentially, I'm not that worried. Maybe I would like it to be this within 100 millimeters or 5 inches. And that is now defined as my specific requirements. So I want, maybe that's a bit of a contradiction. Maybe I'm not that worried about the fabrication. Maybe that needs to be detailed enough and as built to a certain level of accuracy.
So this is that container of information requirements on this task, right? That there's so much information. Typically we do this in Excel, and for every one of these geometry description checklist items, we end up building another document. We end up build that we have to reference to from that spreadsheet, or we're trying to cram it into another column or another row. We've seen teams create all these abbreviations to try to cram all this information that ends up creating these complex spreadsheets. And we need this information, but the more we build and cram into one specific area, it becomes very complex. And what this offers here is just a container that holds all this information, along with a communication area where we can mention and communicate to those teams involved. We'll show that a little bit more, but all of that is now tracked and easily referenced to in one area.
Yep. So once we've started to define these requirements based on some of these fields already, you might think, oh, I need something else. So in this container, I might want to add a new field. And let's say that I actually want to track the cost of these. And because I'm adding this as a specific addition to our standard scope, I want to know what the cost is. So I can add a field to this and simply call this cost and say that this is the estimated cost for, it could be for modeling, it could be for install, it could be for everything. And I can then define whether I want to apply this to essentially this level or a group or everything. We can get into a lot more detail on that. And the data type is actually just going to be a cost. We can set the currency symbol. And let me pick a blue color for this one so you can show you how this works as well. I've now defined this as a cost. I'm going to move this field all the way to here, so the top, so you can see it. And now I can actually just enter a cost, or I could ask somebody else to enter that cost. So we've got a completely flexible container of requirements. So now we've created our mechanical equipment for our asset requirements. Maybe these ones are not part of that asset requirement. So maybe I'm just going to delete these rows so that we don't have them in our project. It makes it even more simple for those people that I'm bringing in. These are the assets that I would like inside of my asset information model. And if we then let's show all of the different pieces of the puzzle. And we want to see, these are the checklist items on the task. This is the cost cell that we want to. This is where it's labeled to show the color that we represented, and somebody can add a value in here. Maybe somebody wants to add some documents, etc. So we've got this container of requirements. We can see it visually in the grid. We can see it as we open this container inside of the cell. And this is all without having to have 20 spreadsheet columns and ending up with thousands and thousands of rows of requirements. Now we've done this, we've got our set of documents, we've got our starting point for our scope. I'm going to now start to ask for collaboration from other people. So I'm going to go to our dashboard and think about who else I want to bring into this project. Now, the project is still in a pre-contract phase. So I'm going to include Akosh on this project, but I'm only going to give Akosh the role of a prospective team member. And when I do this, it will actually change the team to be a prospective team as well. Akosh will get an invite. And what that will mean is I could actually have other teams on this project as well. And they could be other prospective teams. So let's say Team B, their role is potentially also the mechanical engineer, and they are also a prospective team. And I could invite other people, and they would not see Akosh. They would not see what Akosh is up to. They would not see his team. They would only see my team because I am a manager. I'm overseeing what they're doing. Akosh, you just got an invite to come into the project. Yep.
I'm in.
I'm also going to take a look at Akosh's roles and responsibilities. So on the roles and permissions, I can see that there are predefined roles and having certain sets of permissions. On the prospective team, I can see what they can do. And maybe I want to change that to say, actually, I want you to be able to edit certain things, not none. I want you to actually edit things that are assigned to you and yet to be assigned, maybe. And I want to allow him to change document sections to be shared, but not to publish them. And different parts of this, maybe I want him to be able to update the statuses on some tasks. Anything else that you think you need, just based on what you think you need
I
to do?
think you provided me good access. So
Cool.
what I believe will happen is now I can jump into the project and start developing my answer and looking into the scope, what you requested from us.
Perfect. Sounds good. And then just so that you can see what happens, I'm going to add Michelle on this as well as a prospective team member. And what I'll do here, Michelle is on Akosh's team. While Akosh is making some edits, I can show you Michelle's account. Just jumping to Michelle's account, we can see that she has now got access to the same project. She only has access to the docs and the scope module as a prospective team member, so that when she joins, we can see that she has at the moment access to these two documents. However, as soon as I start to make updates to those for the permissions, I can go into our documents and I can start to say, I can see that Akosh is already commenting. I want to restrict potentially these documents. Maybe I would like to restrict to just Akosh's team so that he can see this. So now Akosh's team has access to this, the exchange information requirements document. And then on the construction contract document, I'm actually going to change this so that no teams have access and only managers, only the people that have management rights can actually see this document. So now if I jump back to their team, you can see it's been updated. So now Michelle on Akosh's team only has access to that one document, and they would not even see the other teams. So you can even see, look, this is what the roles and responsibilities look for like for her. She can only see Akosh and doesn't even see that there's another team bidding on this project.
So the beautiful thing that is really happening here is not having to send out these tender packages and then trying to find out what responses we received, but actually really honestly being able to compare apple to apple because we are setting up the same structure. We are inviting these companies to tender our project and they can now come in, fill out, develop their plans, how they want to proceed. And then we can really compare these together and decide who we want to award, who do we want to work with, who do we want to appoint and create an agreement with to start working on a project. So I'm going to jump in and start. I already added a comment, but I'm going to review and maybe add some more questions to this.
Great. And then I'm going to need some help. Oh, Louis, did you just add yourself, Louis?
Yep. Yeah, I just went ahead and added myself there.
Cool. So yeah, Louis, because he's a manager on that workspace, he could join this project. I didn't even need to invite him because he already had the permission level to be able to then come in and help. So Louis joined the project as well. And you can start to see us all collaborating on this same project, same setup. I can see that there's activity on this section because of the dot. And if I start to look at this, I can open and then see, can you add a description so I can better understand the project? That's a very good question. As somebody with permission and somebody that I can come in and I could start to work on this, I could then do this. Maybe that's something that Louis could do, so he could pick up this comment as well. And we can also see all of the changes that are occurring on all of these sections at the same time as well. So, okay, so there's more comments out of this one. I find it important to look at the project history. Oh, that's, yes, the history of the section. That's
Yeah, why not?
those changes that are also being made. And I can start to understand from the versions what's happened. I can see that there are new comments. I can start to go through them, respond to them. I can maybe respond. Let me respond to Akosh as well. And as I respond to Akosh, yes, let's do that. He can start to see the threaded conversations. Maybe we want to actually highlight certain parts of this and add comments to the specific parts. And as I add comments to specific parts, you can see where it's highlighting that. So this part is highlighting both of those. But the point to this is that we can have a collaborative approach. We can see what's unresolved from this set of comments. We can go through resolving these comments. And as I'm resolving these comments, I go through, hopefully all of them get resolved. And then we can see all of the history of what's happened on this section in an overview. But I can also start to say when it's being shared and when it's being published. So I'll share this one and I can see the status here being shared and published. So we can see this in the history of exactly who is doing what, how it's going down, and to get to a collaborative agreement. I can see that Akosh is also coming in here and making these updates, and he had permission to be able to share it. He didn't have permission potentially to look at some parts of the content. He didn't have permission to update some parts of the content, but we can see that, and we can see he's made some changes. He shared it. I can review these changes again. I can comment on them. I could put some nice emoji reactions on them. I can then say, yes, we're good to publish this part.
Yeah, this whole workflow in one spot removes that bottleneck. So if we refer back to that image of the camper carrying all the gear and the other two running off ahead, this is that moment where that prevents all of that. Usually these comments come back in 10 different, you send out a tender package, you end up coming back with 10 different commenting through email or Bluebeam and all these other markup methods. Here it's all done in the same place with multiple documents. The privacy still there, the security still there, and you're doing it all together. And each of these sections, you know what the status is. Is it approved? Is it still commenting? So you're checking off all of the structured sections one by one. I think one thing that was important also is assigning sections. So if Clive and I still needed to do some work on these, can you jump into the other tab, Clive?
Yep.
In here, I started to assign some of the work to Clive. So if I needed him to fill out the project details, I'm working on one. So we're right here, we're also distributing who's in charge of each of the sections. That way it just doesn't fall under one person. This definitely keeps that document moving forward.
Yep. We can also say, hey, hold on, you want to help me on this as well.
Yeah.
Shared workload. Yeah, very cool. It's not just creating a contract agreement or something we call a contract agreement. It's actually all about creating collaborative agreements. So collaboration live rather than getting something like this and downloading it as a PDF or sending it on an email. It's about bringing people into the same project and collaborating to get to an agreement. We also do the same thing on the scoping. So if we move to the scope, this is where the rubber meets the road with defined requirements that say, I require this to be modeled or to be installed or to be fabricated to this level of accuracy, to detail, to geometry, to definition, to description, to checklist, to cost, to everything, all of that defined inside of this package of requirements. And then we can collaborate on it as well. So maybe if I open this one here, maybe if I start to assign other people to this, I can say, Akosh, this is going to be your responsibility. So I really need you to, Akosh, I need the cost on this. And so we can start to have a threaded conversation. I could even grab the link to this specific card, send it to him in some other way, but this would send him an email and he would click on that email and come straight to this place. And then he might have some desire to make some updates or make some changes for this. Maybe you want me to add a document to it. Maybe that would be something that you would want me to do. Ah, there we go. To add
Great
this as
idea.
add this as a placeholder document. Okay, I would like a placeholder document. That's a great idea. So I'm going to add a requirement, not as something that I have. I haven't got the file, but if I had a file, I could drag and drop it into this container of requirements. I might have the file already in File Manager, so it might be a file that's uploaded into the CDE that Plannerly has here. You might have it as a link to somewhere else, so I might put a link in. But right now, we're actually just saying it's going to be a placeholder. And you can get very descriptive with these names. If you want to, you can follow the file naming convention. We're going to get into that when we dig into the CDE at the end, where it's actually automating the file naming conventions. But right now, I'm going to say certificate, and the extension is going to be a PDF. And I'm going to say that it is your responsibility to do that. So I'm going to add this. And now I've created this as a placeholder. It's got a dashed line around it. We understand who is responsible for this. And it's now a placeholder as a requirement. So I can respond and say, yep, done, thumbs up. Cool. Now that we've defined this set of, oh, and maybe I'm going to add a cost to this as well, just so that we've got a cost in here. Everything importantly that I'm doing here is actually being tracked. So you don't have to think about the challenges with the golden thread. It's all tracked automatically every single time you make a change to this. Exactly who's doing it, timestamped, etc.
It's also worth noting that this whole approval workflow, like we have in Docs, is also here in scope. So if you wanted to go through and propose certain scope or approve it collaboratively, maybe Akash wants to go through and has that capability to change those statuses as a proposed scope or approved scope, depending on the workflow that you want to with the teams, you can start changing those statuses, Clive. So it kind of leads into what is proposed, what is approved, and you can create that status or that workflow that meets your workflow today.
Yeah, absolutely. So each one of these different statuses here can be managed. You can create whatever you want and have different colors for them. There are default ones in here, so it starts off as pending, and then it could be maybe me, but maybe Akash, you could propose this one. Are you there to be able to do that, or are you in the chat? Yep. So, okay, Akash has proposed this. I would also be notified about this, and I could then start going through, and maybe I could filter for only those that are proposed. And at that point in time, I would want to go through and review them. And I could do that in this grid as well. So I could see, okay, what's the cost for this? Maybe there's a checklist that I want, and to see the documents. Maybe I don't need the checklist at this point in time, but I can see all of that information that I need to in the grid, go through and review it. If I want more detail or I want to see the history, I can then jump into the task and start reviewing maybe the history or digging into even more of this. And when I'm happy, or even adding another document in this grid, when I'm happy with this, it's as simple as just saying, I'm going to approve this. And now it goes away from this view because it's filtered out. It's only showing me what's been proposed. So that's a really easy way to make sure that we are defining exactly the requirements for the exact purpose in a way that is clear for everyone to understand and is clear for people to then carry out on their projects. In the next sessions, we're going to talk about how this involves master information, task information delivery planning, how this is the detailed responsibility matrices as well, how that goes into the contract, how IDS, information delivery specifications, are created, how you might want to use that scope data, how this flows into File Manager, and what we would have in here. You can see that everything we upload, so we've actually not uploaded this certificate, but this is a requirement that we added here that then can be matched with the delivery. All of this is going to be explained as we go through. Just to recap, we started with a template, and in that template project, we saw how we could define fields that were driven by the database, whether they were fields that were completed in the project. Maybe it was a field that was really detailed and had a lot of information that you want to carry across and make it persistent. We also showed how we could set up all of the different model responsibilities, or how you could set this up as a template and how you could then use that. Then we jumped into a new project, and we involved certain people in our team as we started to develop this. Then we added a prospective team and invited Michelle and Akash to this team. And that prospective team could not see the other prospective team and their team members. So you can start to assign specific documents to each of those teams. We started to say this document is only seen by certain parties. We could see people commenting, going through approval processes to be able to get there. And then we looked at the scoping and how we could bring in the information from our library and what import settings we needed. Then we looked at how maybe we had missed some things that we needed, and maybe we needed to add certain information requirements for the cost. And we looked at how we would do that to manage these project task fields. And we could see that they could be anything. So you could have more types of documents or Booleans and so on. How these can be a placeholder document, so we can add a placeholder requirement for a document that's required later on. How you can see all of those things in the grid as well. And how you can maybe even, if you wanted to, you can just drag and drop a document later on. We'll see how we go through that.
Yeah, we'll show a lot more next, but importantly, showing how this can be contracted and versions on that. So we'll go through the contracting workflow as well.
Yep. We're going to talk about risk register, mobilization plan, master information delivery planning, responsibility matrices, actually appointment protocols. So the legal language around this and how we create targeted work packages for information delivery specifications and get those e-signed as well. So lots to cover in the next session. There are some QR codes if you wanted to follow what we're doing on LinkedIn. Those go directly to our LinkedIn profiles. And also we have an information managers group that you can join, that we love to share what's going on around the world of information management. We would love to see you in that group as well. Number one was the orientation. We had that this was about planning, defining clear, actionable information requirements. Next is about how you actually align teams with that and how you create collaborative contracts. And really, this is the tipping point between the assessment and need stage, the definition of requirements from exchange information requirements for an owner's perspective. And then it tips into where you're starting to get delivery teams involved and what's important for exchange of information between those delivery teams. It's important to go into the contract, and how do you make it structured enough that everyone understands it, everyone gets the right numbers in place, and everyone can be their delivery as well. So this is what we'll go through in the next one. We'll then talk about tracking. How do you organize the CDE, the metadata, and the deliverables? Then handover and how you automate the verification of everything from a file to a model deliverable and more. How do you automate Kobe handover information and all of that? And we'll have a final session with a full summary of everything that we've covered. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you same time.
See you.
Bye, guys.